there's always this idea of what if, and it's always the worst case scenario. It's never like, what if I succeed, or what if it's gonna be great? And that's essentially, if we want to succeed in life, we need to learn how to challenge that and then go in and see what we can achieve from it. And then, of course, to believe that it can be done. And that's usually where a lot of people, they falter. It's because they just don't believe it can be done, because they never seen the results of it, because they never did anything like it. So we don't want to be separated from the pack, because essentially that could mean our death, at least when we were living in caves and stuff, right? So we need to have that, some sort of validation, but it's important, at least if you want to thrive with the people you surround yourself with, that you make sure that you share the same values. But the problem here is that you determine your worth in how they react to you, you see? So the problem there is your whole perception of what creates your worth, but it's the way you perceive the situation to affect you. It's like this worst case scenarios going on in your mind. So that means they put on an expectation to what's going to happen. And if that expectation doesn't happen, then they fail. Well, then you set yourself up to fail. But as you say, when you get comfortable with taking that decision, not knowing the 100% outcome, but just knowing that it's the process of doing it, that's where the value is.
Jesper Wolthers, welcome to Knowing Who You Are. You are a mindset coach from Denmark, and it's a great privilege to be able to talk to you today. And you have your own podcast, which is Growth Collective Podcast. So that's how I came to know. So it's really great pleasure to have this conversation, especially I understand that you'll be able to shed some different light on this whole conversation, and where your ideas are more based on neuroscience and how our mind works, and how to rewire the mindset, so to speak, to help a person or your client to get them to their full potential.
Hey, Ershad. Well, thank you for the lovely introduction. And you definitely hit the head on the nail on a lot of good things there. I'm feeling good. I just returned to Denmark yesterday after 3 months in Spain and Portugal. So here to celebrate Christmas and, meet up with friends and so I'm excited for that.
That'd be great. So you are based in Denmark, and you were born in Denmark as well?
Yes, I am based in Aarhus, Denmark, which is the second biggest city for the people who want to know that.
Okay,
and
great.
This is where I live. This is where I have a lot of good friends, but I would also consider myself more and more of like a world citizen, so to say, as I do find a lot of intrigue in traveling, meeting other cultures, and the whole concept through in the Growth Collective is also to join people with different backgrounds, different cultures, that has that is aligned on the way of wanting better for themselves, wanting better for the world, and helping each other grow.
No, that's great. And since you are born in Denmark, so you speak, how many languages do you speak? Or what is your main language? Is Danish, I understand, but what other languages do you speak?
I speak Danish, and then I speak English fluently, and then they've been trying to teach me German since I was a kid. So let's just say if I get lost on a German highway, I'll know my way around, but that's about it.
Because why I'm getting there, because language plays an important role in terms of how we interpret things in our brain, and in the subconscious, how things get programmed. Say I speak certain language, certain amount of language, and you speak certain amount of language, but a word that means something in my language, say, for example, I speak Bengali and I understand Urdu, I speak Hindi, and there are other languages. So how I understand certain things, not necessarily, it probably doesn't mean verbatim the same in Danish or probably even in English. So being a mindset coach, first of all, let's get to the point. What's the difference between a mindset coach and a life coach?
Well, to be fair, like the term coach isn't like sacred. Anyone can essentially use that. It's not like a doctor degree, and so you can call your coach in a lot of different areas of life, which is, there's a lot of coaches out there that might not have taken like a real coaching education, or have specialized in a certain area of the mind or therapy, and so because coaching is essentially just another form of therapy, looking
Yeah.
more into like how you grow towards what you want rather than figuring out where you come from. Now, that's a simplified way of saying it. Of course,
Hmm.
there's more to it. So when you say what's the difference between a mindset coach and a life coach, it's more like what do you define yourself as, like, so where you take your niche from. And I'm very focused about the mind. I have a master in NLP, so that's neuro linguistic programming, as we talk
Hmm.
about with the languages and so. And I've just made it my priority to focus on the mind, because that's where all essentially conscious change comes from. If you want to change
Hmm.
how you feel, if you want to change how you behave, you have to go through the mind. So whether it's, you're first starting to get into self-development and change, you have to focus on the mind, or whether you've been in it for, forever, it's still where a lot of the change comes from. Now,
Hmm.
then you can argue there's, emotion attached to the body. There is behaviors that are impulsive that you can't consciously control, and that's very true. But you can only change what you are conscious of. So it
But
all goes
again,
through
end
the
of the
mind.
day, emotions, feelings, they are somehow connected to the neuromodulators too. So that's kind of connected to your brain. But definitely there are external things like your food, probably. That's an external thing. What you're intaking, and based on that, your mood might change and what you feel, your depression, and a lot of things are attached to that. So that's a good thing. So mindset coaches are dedicated to rewiring individuals' mindset, so to speak, and allowing them to be the very best of what they want to be in life. And when it comes to life coaching, it's more holistic. So in
Yeah,
terms of overall improvement of their life.
I would say so. Yes, I'm a life coach, but I'm
Mm.
calling myself a mindset coach because that's my focus. So coaching, life is big, right? So when we
Mm.
focus on the mindset, we focus on life. And if you want to change your life, you have to change your mindset. So they go hand in hand. It's just people calling themselves different types of coaches, just have different niches or things they
Mm.
specialize in. You can call yourself like a confidence coach.
Yeah.
Well, you still look at the mind and how to change and how to think and feel. You just say, I'm very focused on confidence, and that's like my niche, which is
Mm.
great. I just have a more overall perspective of the mind. So in that sense, it's also more
I mean,
holistic.
everything is part of life anyway. So you just tackle one aspect or focus on one aspect of life. It's like being a doctor. So then, once you qualify, then you specialize in certain areas of medicine.
Yes.
I was saying that since you have clients probably from different backgrounds, it's not only people from Denmark. So
Yeah.
when they explain, and since language has an important part to play, and being from different cultures, nationalities, races, how do you sometimes find any kind of obstacles? And do you find that something is lost in translation as well sometimes? Does it happen?
Well, everyone has their own background in that sense, but the things are, even though we have different cultural backgrounds, we're still human beings with at least somewhat the same kind of problems,
Mm.
like, so the thing about the mind is that it's kind of a language that is universal to that degree. Sure,
Mm.
you might look at the world differently,
Mm.
but just because you look at the world differently, it doesn't mean that you can't come to the same kind of conclusion. So when I talk to my clients, it's not so much about, me communicating what they should believe or how they should think. It's more about me questioning the way they think to make them think in a different way to then widen their perspective, right? So I would say it's not like I find a lot of conflict in that
What I was
relationship.
trying to get at is that because life coaching is different from therapy or counseling, so to speak, because you, as a life coach, as a mindset coach, probably not given to giving advice to people saying this is what you should do. It's more about you're getting them to talk to themselves through your questions. So you're
Yes.
questioning when they answer, so they keep on thinking and they slowly find the answers themselves. So your idea is to direct them to their place where the problem is coming from.
For sure. Like, the real 100% coaches would say you should never, give advice, or you should never, kind of direct people in a certain way. But
Mm.
I would say, that's true a lot of the time. You shouldn't, like, you can, do leading questions. Doesn't this sound good? Or don't you want to do this? And then you're leading the client on, and that's not what you want to do, because then you do what society does all the time, is trying to shape the individual, which you don't
Mm.
want, of course. So a lot of the time I definitely focus just on coaching to guide in that way. But I also think it's important to understand that when you have a relationship with a client, like at least in the way I coach, it's important that there's some more trust. So yes, you have, a professional relationship, but you also have to be trusting and to be someone they can open up to. And if you always have like okay, I will only ask questions, and that's, that's the box I put myself in, I don't find myself being very authentic in that. And multiple studies show that the more trust you build and the more authentic you are with whoever you're helping, well, the easier it is for that client to progress, because, if they actually trust you and you feel like they have a genuine good relationship, then they're also more inclined to follow the process that you create together.
Yeah, the idea would fail straight away if they can't trust you and they cannot open up. That's main problem. So for you, when it started, when you thought about becoming a life coach or a mindset coach, was it as a career, or there was something, some kind of impetus or some inspiration behind it in your childhood or growing up, that you thought that, okay, now I feel that this transformation or something has transformed you in life, and that's how you've been driven to becoming a life coach? How did it happen?
That's a good question, and it's a long story, but I think it's both, really. Like, I've always been inclined, I've always had values that were connected to helping others, and I've
Mm,
always been very interested in people and behavior. Also now looking back, when I wasn't conscious of it, I see now that that was just something that was interesting to me. And as so, when I walk through life, I was really passionate about like building projects with others and building
mm-hmm,
something that was greater than myself, that had some kind of impact. That led me to music, like yourself. So because that was a place where I could create something bigger and I could do it
mm,
with others, and it could create some kind of bigger, happiness or bigger moment with others. And I found a lot of joy and a lot of purpose in that. And unfortunately for myself, while I was on that path and wasn't really that conscious about what was going on, I was just living my life. I unfortunately lost my mother in the age of 19, which
okay.
was my big catalyst to change.
Mm,
So this was one of those moments that, where change comes for you. You're not seeking it yourself; it comes, and you have to adapt.
yeah.
And that, of course, made me think a lot of differently about life. I was very confused at that time, and for years to come I was trying to find my place, because where once I thought that, okay, this is who I am, this is where I'm going, this is what's meaningful, or to be fair, maybe wasn't that conscious about it, just living. Now I found myself in a situation where, like, when something that's so important to me, something
Mm,
that's so, such a foundational piece of who I am and the way I see myself in the world can be taken away and everything can be changed. That, of course, like, first ruined me and created the confusion. But then it also made me question, well, if that can be changed, so like such a fundamental part of me, well, maybe then other really fundamental parts of me and the way I see myself in the world can be changed as well.
mm,
And that kind of started impacting me in a way where I unconsciously would search for answers. I would you go on YouTube and search for questions and be interested in people that were living different lives. And so I kind of enforced the values I've already had with exploring and creating bigger things and helping people. But
mm,
now it was just kind of, boosted from this new perspective. And
mm.
long story short, I went into entrepreneurship. I created some small businesses in the music business. Then I started with doing some videography. With time, I went into network marketing, sold a lot of my stuff. I even moved to Bali in the start of 2020
Okay.
to build a business. And then, of course, Corona happened, and so I had to return. But in this time, I had invested in my first coach myself, and he just totally changed my life, because
Mm,
for me it was like the glue between all the pieces of information that I had and the way I saw the world. And then it was just like a filter to filter out the different parts that I didn't need and I need to help me understand where I needed to go and what I needed to do. And it was such a mind-blowing experience for me. So when I got home from Bali, the first thing I did was look up, coaching and how I could educate myself in it. And then just to test it out, right? And when I
mm.
got my fingers on it, I just never looked back. So fast forward, here we are. I spent the last 2 years traveling, building a business, working on myself, studying, and yeah.
When you said that some accident happened in your life, that there is a particular watershed moment, and suddenly you feel that, okay, either my life is over or you transform yourself, you grow out of that. So in your case, that happened, and also your creativity, which you mentioned as well, as a you were into music business and you're a musician yourself. So creativity, the idea of creativity is very interesting, as long as how mind works, because it has some connection with building resilience, because creativity somehow it makes you very strong in terms of dealing with uncertainties. One of the things that humans are quite scared of. At the same time, we like certainty in everything, but we are very uncomfortable with uncertainties. That's one of the things, and creativity helps. So in your case, you have been interested in music from your childhood. You've been trained definitely in it, because your songwriting, your lyrics are quite geared towards that direction. So how did you think that you'll put these two things together, which is really quite a novelty?
For me, it just came quite naturally. When I, just to give the listeners a little bit of background,
Mm-hmm.
I've been trained in music. I used to play bass in different bands, playing genres from jazz to funk to pop to rock to all these things. But the as some musicians have a tendency to really love the music for creating and playing for themselves and see where that process can go, and I do enjoy that a lot as well. But for me, music is more about what you can share with others.
Mm.
So there's always been this inclination to have the music be around something that would bring people together.
Communal value.
Exactly, to some degree,
Yeah.
something where people could take something from when they heard it. And for me, it's just, yeah, it just felt natural. And so when I started to, well, I've been writing for many years,
Mm.
but what I always found is that I was used to write about something that was, of course, deep to me in some sense. And what is deep and purposeful to me now is to help people grow. So I'm just taking the default or the natural instinct I had to create about what I felt, which I think is very common for a lot of musicians, to be fair, at least to
Mm-hmm.
some degree, and then put it into the frame of creating songs that could motivate people or make them think or create some new perspective, or just create something that could either soothe their pain or motivate them in some kind of way. And I take that and put it into music. And it's always a process, but I always find myself to write pretty good songs when I do that.
Yeah, that's really good, because sometimes I've seen, being an artist myself and being around artists, the artistic endeavor, it starts from a very selfish place as well at times, because you're like, okay, this is what I want to do. And there are some people who wouldn't even bend a little bit, because your point of view is more being in service to others, where you're giving people entertainment, also trying to connect with them. Was that idea that totally help you keep this selfishness out of this whole idea of creativity, to keep this selfish motive of me, to keep away from that and combine it with an idea of we?
I'm actually going to flip that around, because I think it's important to be selfish in that sense.
Mm.
Because here's the thing. Well, let's go with the idea that a lot of people out there, they post things on social media being an artist, and it's about them. Like, it can be, but to be fair, no one should focus on others in the bigger scheme before they have themselves under some kind of control, or at least have their own needs served, because in the end we're human and we have needs that needs to be covered.
Mm.
So you could always argue, like, for sure social media can have a tendency to be very superficial and people looking for validation and these kind of things, but we should understand that if that's the case, most people that would resonate with that kind of stuff is on the same way of thinking.
Mm.
So would that create value from to one another? Yes, it's a fun thing. It's kind of like junk food to some extent, right? But then again, that's where they are in their life and their path, and to judge
Mm.
that would maybe also be not the wisest thing to do if you
Mm.
judge people on where they are to that extent. So I guess when I create music to make it more about a we than about a me, it's because that makes sense to me. But to be fair, I'm also aware that when people listen to this, and if they like it, they're gonna be attached to me to some extent, so to some extent it's marketing as well, because
Yeah.
it also markets my business and what I do. But that's what feels right to me, that what it feels authentic. And I know, there's a lot of processes of going through these kind of things when you have to start to post yourself on social media and show yourself, like, oh, do I think I am something? Do I think I'm better than others? Do I think that
Or even
is
accept what you are. I mean, there might be millions of people even better than you are, but you don't care about that. You're just, okay, this is me.
Sure. Well, this is me. And to be fair, like I was many years, but I was super afraid to put something of my music and creativity online or show it, because I was surrounded by musicians with critical attitudes and potentially this idea of like, if it's not as good as something I've heard or something I think is good, then it's why do you post it, But it's opinions, How do you think?
This self-consciousness that people are criticizing what I'm doing. Am I good enough? Things like that.
It's very true. Like that is one of the biggest challenges that people face. Like, and it's all from nature's side, that we don't want to be,
the fear of rejection.
Yes, we don't want to be separated from the pack, because essentially that could mean our death, at least when we were living in caves and stuff, right? So we need to have that some sort of validation, but it's important, at least if you want to thrive with the people you surround yourself with, that you make sure that you share the same values. One of the bigger challenges we see today.
So we are scared of being lonely. I mean, alone and loneliness, that's two different ideas. The need to be alone with yourself is very important, to have that self-love, the self-talk, to sit with yourself and try to find that, being self-aware as well, where the problem lies and what you're struggling with, why you behave in a certain way when you behave. Say, when you're thinking, oh, shall I put this? You probably have written a very beautiful song and you have a good voice as well. You're playing nice, but you still are scared. So then to look within and think that, what's stopping me then? Everything is good. Most of the time, definitely, this fear you face a lot, that most of the things that comes or springs out of the fear that people have about the judgments of other people are mostly external pressures that we feel that creates the fear. So what's your idea of fear and what generates that one, and how do you tackle that? So first, let's start with the idea of fear. Then if you could share with us, what kind of fear do you always find yourself confronting every now and then?
But let's start with what fears I find myself dealing with. So in every aspect of growth, you will find yourself pushing yourself to a new distance, right? That's the idea of widening the comfort zone. Doing new things, you get more comfortable within that, so you essentially are more capable of doing more things without feeling the fear or pressure or some kind of conflict doing it. So when I find myself in fear, it's will always have been something that is new, right? That is new, or the potential of being scary or so. But if you break fear down, essentially what it is it's an old biological mechanism trying to stop us from going into uncertainty, because back in the days, uncertainty could kill us. So, if it was a saber-toothed tiger, if it was, a poisonous snake, whatever it was, we shouldn't go too much into the uncertainty, because then we would not, reproduce and, continue the process of humanity. So if we understand that and understand that, okay, it's actually just a biological mechanism. It doesn't, it should be a tool, but now it's limiting us. And it does that because in our everyday life, there's not a saber-toothed tiger on the other side of the bathroom, or there's no one, trying to hurt you, at least not in most Western developed countries, like on a regular basis. So if we need to understand that, and understand every time we feel fear and we feel like we should avoid something, we need to first get awareness of it, and then we need to challenge it. Because let's like a great one is, back in the teenage days, or maybe even still, where you wanted to approach a person of another gender, or the same gender for that matter, because you were attracted to them, and you start to feel this fear. It's like, holy shit, it's like it's an it feels like an emotion that just keeps you away from it. There's something pulling you, it's something that wants to keep you away, but you never really understand why you want to keep it away. But then if you ask yourself, usually the argument is something like, maybe she'll laugh, maybe she'll do, maybe it won't work, whatever. And then it comes back to this idea of rejection, as we talked about. So, okay, so you feel the fear of being rejected, but why is it you're afraid of that? Because that's not going to kill you. It's just going to be what it is, but it's the way you perceive the situation to affect you. It's like this worst case scenarios going on in your mind, like, okay, if she rejects me, maybe everyone will laugh, maybe they won't see me as the right like how I want to be perceived, like talking about the fixed mindset, right? How we're perceived. And then from
so
there,
I need to be respected. That's one of the need that, okay, I'll lose my respect as well.
Well, to some degree, that's at least what you want. But the problem here is that you determine your worth in how they react to you. You see? So the problem there is your whole perception of what creates your worth. Because if you wouldn't, if you were sure that you were worth it, you could just go and talk to her, and whatever would happen, it wouldn't really affect you that much. It's okay to be scared because it's new, right? But you wouldn't really like dread it as some people do. And this is with all aspects of life. It's the job interview, it's the going traveling, there's always this idea of what if, and it's always the worst case scenario. It's never like, what if I succeed, or what if it's gonna be great? And that's essentially, if we want to succeed in life, we need to learn how to challenge that and then go in and see what we can achieve from it. And then, of course, the belief that it can be done. And that's usually where a lot of people, they falter. It's because they just don't believe it can be done, because they never seen the results of it, because they never did anything like it, you see?
And also need to be comfortable with failures, probably, because that's part of life. I mean, you have to be able to be easy and accept that you will fail. Every new thing you try, but it makes you stronger.
It's the idea of failure here that's the problem. Because they see themselves fail if they don't get what they want. So that means they put on an expectation to what's going to happen, and if that expectation doesn't happen, then they fail. Well, then you set yourself up to fail, like quote unquote fail. But as you say, when you get comfortable with taking that decision, not knowing the 100% outcome, but just knowing that it's the process of doing it, that's where the value is. Then you start to frame the situations differently, because then it's not about the results of what's going to happen. Yes, it would be great if this happens, but if it doesn't, then you'll learn how to get closer to that outcome or that emotion, which is essentially what we're looking for to some degree when we take the actions. So it's the whole perception of this idea of failure that needs to be changed. Because failure is building blocks, as you say.
Because that's where the autonomous nervous system, it has this idea of this sympathetic, parasympathetic responses. So say, for example, when something like that happens, suddenly you might see someone had turned red. It's embarrassment. But the thing is that you can't stop that. It would happen. It's a physiological situation, and it would just have those responses. But how you respond to it, what your responses towards that would be, that's one of the things. And in terms of fear as well, what even in neuroscience, what they say that you cannot really remove the fear. It never happens. You can only replace it with positive experiences. So, I mean, this is what, I mean, as you were saying, on the other side of the door, there won't be any saber-toothed tiger. Say, for example, I watched too many Tarzans probably in my childhood. So I had this fear of water for a long time. So swimming was a problem for me. But I started swimming for quite late, and my partner had been a very good swimmer. So she had been teaching me swimming. And every time she would say, okay, come on, try. My problem was that I would always feel there's something in the water, in a clear swimming pool. So what I did initially, you have to face the fear. I said, okay, what's going to happen? So I started sitting down with a goggle on, sit down under the water. Just look around, before I could swim. Because you have to face the fear unless you do this. And that's what I feel now, that I have seen that through my experiences in life, that whenever something makes you uncomfortable, it's better to face that. And as you're saying, that we suffer more in our imagination than what would happen in reality. Many things can happen, but this is about the fear, the uncertainty, as you're saying, and the fear of rejection. So in terms of the fear, the second part of my question, what I was asking, What's your worst fear? What you're afraid of every now and then, or what bothers you sometimes?
So I think there's a difference to what I'm afraid of now and then, and what bothers me, and then what my worst fear is. I think most people will agree that the worst fear is like losing someone you truly love, right?
Mm.
So whether it's a family member or a very close relation, and I think it's one of those things that's hard to imagine unless you've gone through it. And even though I've lost my mother and gone through that, and it was horrible, I also grew a lot from it, of course. Now I will say yes, that will definitely still be my worst fear. But if it's more like on a regular basis, there's of course for me a big process in, with developing the Growth Collective. It's, again, stepping into your authentic self, your truth, and showing up for yourself. And what happens if when you show up and you gather attention, there's of course also the possibility of gather negative attention. Now that was something that I was more scared of in the past. It's not like really a problem now, but I think to some extent, there's always with new possibilities, new actions, new things that you implement, there's to some degree a hint of like, what if I change to the worst? What if I don't, serve the people in the way that I want? What if I get too selfish or get caught up because I get more influence and so? And I don't think it's a big challenge, but of course, with more you take in, like, things just change. So of course, I know I'm on the right path, and that's why I also, implement my own self-improvement routines, doing my meditation, doing my journaling, doing my awareness training and my self-coaching, and having coaches myself to always make sure that I'm on the right path. Because what people will see, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, is that they can be on the right path, but then fall back into their old patterns very easily, because old patterns are so heavily ingrained.
Yeah.
Now I don't really have old patterns with, being cruel or being but I do have patterns where I feel myself not performing to what I want to do, or so. So it's always like going back, like figuring out what it is that's going on for you. But to like a bigger extent, I don't feel like fear is the biggest challenge for me right now, because I've made friends with fear and understand when I feel, okay, there's something here, then I know, okay, then it's the right direction, because I've made sure that wherever I'm going is something that's aligned to me and my values.
For me,
So,
journaling helps. I mean, whenever I feel I'm uncomfortable with something, putting it down and writing it down, try to break it down, or even try to put it down. Okay, this is what's making me uncomfortable. It starts becoming clearer that you see what's the source of the problem is. And in terms of, again, you just mentioned when you're trying to start something, again, the primordial fear that we have, or the discomfort with uncertainty, and again, problems with our self-worth. Sometimes knowing that we are good, but still, or we work for it. We can't be, I mean, it would be a bit rather proud, it would sound, that I'm good. But if you say that, okay, I work for it, I'm ready for it, to face it. When you know that, still, you doubt your self-worth. But again, I think the idea of self-love comes as well. Because when you're saying that you lose someone, I mean, just to share with you, this had been my worst fear as well. And I've been through it in my life. When I lost, say, someone I was very attached to. But then I learned that people even die. What are you going to do? So people will leave you. And it happens. People will come in your life, they will leave you. And if they're there to stay, they will stay. If not, they're part of the journey. But main thing I think I learned in that process, that so long I start loving myself and be comfortable, that I can spend time with myself comfortably without the urge, oh, okay, this person I love is not with me anymore. Or this person, I mean, if you are dependent on external sources for your happiness, that's where the problem starts. So as you mentioned, the self-love, I think it's very important, and to learn to be with yourself. So have you been guilty of any such negative practices which you later on became aware of and you consciously worked on it? Did you have anything as such?
yeah, like I have plenty, and I still do, and I think that's essentially one of the biggest problems when we want to develop ourselves, right? We need to remove what's not holding us back, or what is holding us back, so we can use the energy of what is, whether that's scrolling too much on your phone, consuming the wrong content, that's not, positively influencing you, the wrong people, too much consumption of drugs or alcohol, the list goes on. And I think for me, I used to play a lot of computer, like I love to game, and I still do.
Mm.
And I think the process here is that I went on a path where I was like, I do this too much. And it was because it was such a big part of my life, like really deep rooted patterns, but I also enjoyed it a lot. But there was a conflict there because if I would spend more time into it, then I wouldn't have time to develop what I found to be purposeful for me. So
Mm.
that's, helping other people, understanding myself in the mind, these things, but I still wanted it as a part of it. But then again, if it's something that you do too much, you can quickly, run back into it. And as my life goes on, it's definitely been a roller coaster up and down. But what I found is that it's it's always about the balance, right? The good old word.
Mm.
But you don't find the balance unless you get really, really aware of who you are, what you want, where you're going, what's important to you, and test it out. And this is the big one, because yes, as you say, you need to be happy within yourself and have your happiness from internal sources. That's very true. But then again, you still are human, and you are a creature that is with other humans. Humans live in pacts, so to say, and as so you, at least the big majority, need some kind of other interaction. So if you're dependent on human for your happiness to some degree, which you are, like I'd love to
Mm.
say that everyone, you can just create your own happiness, but that's not true. The truth is, like, you have values that needs to be shared, and you need to express yourself and being understood. And that's a lot of the challenges we find, is that a lot of the people we surround ourselves with doesn't, they don't understand us, or they don't value the same things.
It's not
So
aligned.
it's not aligned, right? So if you want to change that, well, you need to understand exactly what it is you value. And then it's a good idea to go back to the childhood, actually, to see, well, what is it you enjoyed? And for me,
Mm.
that's still gaming to some sort, because it provokes my mind. I develop a little bit of that. I relax, I chill. But it's also hanging out with friends. It's also developing myself to these things. But then if I can pinpoint that, I can start to seek out where the values are shared. So that
Mm.
might be, in sports with other people doing the same things, or it can be theater, music, these kind of things, or some kind of entrepreneurship.
Challenges. Yeah.
Well, challenges, but also just, hobbies. Like it depends on the way you want to grow and what's important to you. Again, back to the self-awareness work. So yeah, did that answer your question? There's a
No,
lot
yeah, yeah,
here.
definitely. So that's the thing about hobbies, which is very important, where creativity comes. I mean, any kind. I've seen many people. I've met many people where, say, they're an architect now. Someone is a doctor, an engineer, but probably he or she used to love painting. Someone used to love football. I've met a young guy once, and he was complaining literally. He's quite younger, say probably at least 10, 15 years younger than I am. He said, look, I have to study to become a lawyer, because we started discussing, because I did my master's in law. So we were discussing, hey, I studied law, but I left it. I said, oh, I want to leave it too, because my father wants me to be a lawyer.
Mm,
So these are the things growing up we wanted to be, as you mentioned, during your childhood. Like you like gaming. It's not just gaming for its own sake, but what you like in gaming, that's more important. This is where you have to trace back. That's what my passion should be. That's what I am. So in terms of finding those impulse voices in our childhood, when we have that, when we are like a young child, or even when a baby is growing up, as Abraham Maslow, psychologist, he said that about these impulse
exactly.
voices. So we lose that. So did you see that you had any moments of mindset clashes in your childhood, where probably you grew up in a fixed mindset? Look, Jesper, you have to be this, you have to do that. But then you realized, no, there's more to life than that. And then you slowly were introduced to this growth mindset. Did you face anything like that growing up?
Oh, for sure. Like, you know, I think everyone, when they grow up, they test the experiment, right? It's mostly subconsciously, but they think, oh, if I do this, then probably this will happen. And
Mm.
it's usually not what happens. Or sometimes it might be, but again, that's your perception of what's going on. Whether that's, your looks, what's cool, all this. That's just how children are, and it can be a cruel journey for sure, but it teaches us a lot, which is why it's important not to, sometimes kids need to I'm not saying kids need to fight, but I say
Hmm.
kids need to express and do what they need to do to some degree, and then have a home to go home to. That's on a parenting front, but let's not go into that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um,
I think it comes from both sides because kids do want to do that, but problem is that as humans, we have this need for connection and love. And when you feel that your parents are rejecting you because you're not following their path or what they are directing towards you,
yeah,
then this fear again comes, okay, I probably should do that because I don't want to lose them, or that
yeah,
acceptance of this validation from my parents. So that's another problem. So
that's a
you
big problem.
mentioned that being humans, we need to be part of the pack. But in our pack, sometimes we would find people who are not really very helpful or beneficial or conducive to our mental well being,
Mm,
negative people who
mm,
are full of negativity. There could be a lot of different characteristics they have. Someone is like, has a sense of entitlement, so that makes them selfish. They're always thinking you should give them. And there's someone you're giving them, they're still not happy, they're still finding fault with. There are a lot of different kinds. So definitely you probably have faced or still face, and we face every day. How do you handle these negative people? What's your way of dealing with them?
that's a great question. So, one thing we need to be really aware of is how we perceive negative people, like the way what we think is going on. So, let's say someone comes up to you and they're really negative, and what we usually do, especially if we're not aware, is that we think it's something that's going on, and usually about ourselves. So we take things personally, right? So if we go back to, the classic of a parent, for example, or something really close, these are the people that has the most emotional leverage over us, so to say. They know
Mm.
how to push our buttons and all this, and it's usually subconscious. That's what we need to remember. This is pattern that you and them has, created over the years, which
Mm.
means usually people have really, really good intentions, and that's something that a lot of people, they forget when they interact with others, like a parent or a friend or a stranger, for that sense. Like I always say, no one wakes up in the morning with the intention of ruining others' days. There's no one that gonna be, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna be a dick to them. Like
Mm.
that just does that, it doesn't happen.
No.
So when you encounter negative people, you can say, well, at least you want to try and challenge the way you think about the situation and the person. And I'm not saying you should take all their crap, because of course
Mm.
you shouldn't. But again, if you let them affect you negatively, you're essentially telling them, here's my power, you can do with it what you want, you can make me feel bad.
Mm.
That's what you do. So you don't want to do that, of course. You want to say, okay, I like to feel good, I like to be in a good mood. So if you encounter negativity, okay, well, how can you deal with it? Well, one thing is to say, okay, well, this person is having a bad day. Or if you want to go even deeper, this person has ingrained habits and patterns that makes them feel bad a lot of times. Holy shit, I'm glad it's not me.
Mm.
You know, you want to have that kind of empathy. You want to come with this idea of understanding that this person isn't creating this out of desire or want. This is something that happened to them that is now
Mm.
an ingrained part of them.
So when
It's
not
terrible.
conscious, it can be a part of your character. And as you're saying, we are constantly in a loop. When we think of something, it doesn't happen just once. It comes back throughout the day even. And also since there's a thing called ultradian rhythm. So throughout the day, every 90 minutes, it keeps on changing what happens in our sleep pattern as well. So when you're going with your negative thoughts, you definitely wake up, even if you don't have any intentions of doing harm to others, but you are all the grudges and everything you're thinking before going to bed. He or she didn't do right to me today. I deserved that. I wasn't given that. And all these things you're thinking, you're going back to sleep with those thoughts. You definitely
Yeah,
will wake up with that
it's
uncomfortable feeling.
exactly. It's just if you focus on the negative, you're gonna feel and think negatively. Like that's just how simple it is. And I don't think people really understand that like on a deeper level. They don't understand when they say, "Oh, I'm a fucking idiot," because they do
Mm,
something that goes into their mind and that
exactly.
affects their whole life. And
True.
that's even if they just, if they consume bad content, if they're around, people that not serves them, it's just a more and more ingrained loop and pattern that's not going to serve them.
No, it's
So
very important being
yeah.
kinder to yourself. So talking about this negative loop and things we do, because it's down to some kind of habit pattern that we have to develop for our own well-being. So what kind of routine do you follow for your morning or when you go to bed, your evening routines, and to what kind of routines do you have normally?
For sure. So for me, what I found to be very helpful is that in the morning when I wake up, first of all, I drink some water, go to the bathroom, and then I focus on reading for around 20 minutes a day, something that's self-development, mental health based, and then I meditate for at least 10 minutes, either in some kind of mindfulness meditation or visualization meditation, based on how I feel, but also what's important to me in that process. So life comes in processes. Sometimes we're building, sometimes we're maintaining, creating more foundations. So it changes a bit. And then, some days I do some exercise and do some strength training. Other days it's more like, eating breakfast, making sure that whatever I consume is work oriented or growth oriented, at least it's aligned with where I'm going and what's important to me. And then I begin my work. And then in the evening, it's similar. Sometimes a journal. These things they've changed a lot. And I think what's very important here is that you always go back and ask yourself if it's serving you and it's getting you in the direction you want. Because it's also possible to just, all of these things are good. I should eat this, I should exercise here, I should do this. And you take so much on yourself that you're so consumed in the process that you're not really understanding if this is actually serving you towards where you want to go. And that's like the same.
Yeah, so making you unhappy, to be honest, because you feel so pressurized.
Yes, exactly. It's like, I should do this, like the good old should.
Or I haven't done it. Oh my God, I haven't done this one. I was supposed to do for 20 minutes and I missed it. What am I going to do?
Yeah, and then you feel behind and then you start procrastinate because you're already behind. So fuck it all, right?
So the question of procrastination, that's a good segue to the question, because we all are very much given to it. And every time we talk about that we have to, what we want to achieve in our life, procrastination is one of the things that would hold us back. So definitely we all are guilty of that. So am I. So what about you? How do you deal with that? Every now and then when you feel that it's taking you out of your routine, how do you deal with that?
Well, you make sure you go back to the routine, well, at least try and implement it harder, right? But I know, so well, we need to understand that procrastination is essentially us trying to avoid an emotion. That's what's going on. There's something we're trying to avoid that doesn't feel right. So and it usually comes from something like, let's say it's a work task, it usually is, right? Then you have this idea of, okay, maybe you don't have the full overview and it's so overwhelming that it's easier just to, okay, later. Or maybe it's like you want it to be perfect, but as we know, perfect doesn't exist. And then your expectations get so high that you're like, oh, you can't even, think about it. And that's so procrastination is just holding us back. So when we find ourselves procrastinating, first of all, depending on how long you've been doing it that current day, the harder it becomes to go back in the routine or back in the flow, because you're trading a new pattern that is like, this is the relaxation pattern,
exactly.
Right? Going back into that. So you want to plan for it and you want to see when it occurs, especially if this is something that occurs more than, once in a while. If you see that there's a pattern to it, maybe it's around a certain type of work or around certain people or whatever, then you want to sit down, you want to say, okay, what is going on? Like, it's always when I find myself having to exercise. So it's always when I find myself doing, my numbers work, finance work or whatever. So, okay, so there's something here. Now, if it's something you can delegate, I'm a big fan of that. That's like to the side. So see if you can outsource it, like on a workflow. If it's not, then you want to ask yourself, like, so why is this important to me? You want to go back to the reason of this, because what often happens is when we don't have as like true clarity and purpose around why we're doing this, then it's easy to discard, because again, it's just right now in that sense, it's just an annoying emotion rather than a purpose and driving a motivating factor. And that's what we want. So we need to understand, okay, yes, this might not the funniest thing in the world, but it's super important to me. And we only do that by sitting down with a journal, for example, and writing down, why is this important to me? Why do I want to do it? Why do I want to do it?
So also and probably visualization helps probably as well, because you're
100%.
Seeing,
you need to see where you're going. Like, that's the first step of every process. Like, you need to understand what you want, what you don't want. or at least was challenging you. And then you want to say, okay, so how do I go towards this? And how do I overcome the things that's holding me back? That's like, the big overview of what you need to do if you want to overcome procrastination or achieve anything.
So, Jesper, in terms of the Growth Collective podcast that you've started, which is available in Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast as well. So, what's your plan with that? Where are you going with that, and what's the vision?
So, we of course are always interested in gaining more attention, like as any brand. But I think what's really important to us is we start to share some of this knowledge and really create perspective. So that's essentially what we do with our free content. And we felt like a podcast is a good way of doing that, as we get to share, like we're doing now, we get to go deep with some topics. And so it's a good way of sharing that kind of information. And we really want to create a space, or we are creating a space for people to come, to share, to grow, and find a place to feel seen, feel heard, and grow themselves. So, especially in entrepreneurial communities or the environment of entrepreneurs, you'll find a lot of very entrepreneurial focused communities. And that's easy because you have like an intention of building a business and so on, and people join together by that. But what about all the people that like might be just want a no good job, or might just want to be a better parent, or might just want to learn how to deal with the relationship with their parents? Like there's nothing really which I've seen as so that spoke to these people, because of course it's not as streamlined, it's more broad. So what we want to do with the Growth Collective is kind of to have a space for that, where people can come in. They can, listen to the podcast, ask some questions in the group, become part of one of the projects we're developing and working on, whether that's a course on how to feel better fast, which is something I've created, or is something that's more inclined to, okay, let's look into fear, let's look into procrastination, let's look into this. And, as any good structure has, it needs some kind of community, because it's online, of course. So we're really trying to create that. And I don't think we have, well, at least I don't have like a certain idea of, okay, this is exactly how the podcast should go, because it's always a process of development that we need to figure out what people like, what they enjoy, and what we find ourselves enjoying as well, so we can create a steady flow.
The main vision is to help people. Is to be in service of others. Yeah. I mean, when you're a giver, you always have a place in the society or among people. You never get lost. So that's the main vision. And also, as a human, that's one of the urges as well. So where can they find about the podcast and about you, your services as a coach? Where should they look you up?
For sure. So I'm mostly active on Instagram, but you can also add me as a friend on Facebook. So that's JESPER WOLTHERS. We can probably link it in the description.
We'll link it on the description,
And then, we also have a community, the Growth Collective, on Facebook and on Instagram as well. We're doing some changes these days to make it more appealing, give more value, help people grow themselves. So, JESPER WOLTHERS or the Growth Collective on Instagram and Facebook.
Great, Jesper. Jesper, I would have carried on. There are a lot of other things that we could have discussed about. You agreed for an hour, so I'm trying to keep it to an hour. So, but it was really nice talking to you, and we had touched upon, even if we could within the short period, a lot of different aspects. You explained very lucidly, and it was clarified for many people who are confused about those questions. So hopefully we get to do that more later on at some point again when we have some time. So for the time being, thanks a lot for the time that you've given for knowing who you are today.
Thank you for bringing me on. It's been a pleasure.